Do not watch alone. Some things only strike in silence. There are places that do not exist on maps, not because they are hidden, but because reality itself refuses to acknowledge them. The Library of Lost Futures was one such place. Cities denied it. Histories erased it. Even memory rejected it, unless it had already decided to ruin you. The library did not appear to the curious. It did not open its doors to scholars or explorers. It revealed itself only to those whose futures were already broken beyond repair. Ethan Cole had lived in the city for 12 years, yet the streets betrayed him that night. The storm arrived without warning, violent, precise, almost intelligent. Rain fell in heavy sheets, striking the pavement like thrown gravel. Thunder cracked directly above him, never behind, never to the side. Wherever Ethan ran, the sound followed, as if the sky itself was hunting him. His coat was soaked. His breath burned. His shoes slapped against unfamiliar asphalt. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "You should have reached Main Street by now." Instead, the buildings grew narrower, taller, leaning inward like crooked teeth. Streetlights flickered, some buzzing softly, others completely dead. Then the wind died. The rain slowed, and the alley appeared. A dead end. Except it wasn't. At the far end stood a narrow iron door, embedded into brick that looked centuries older than the surrounding city. Ivy crawled over it, thick and alive, as if trying to pull the door back into the wall. Above it, carved deeply into stone, were words so old they looked fossilized. The Library of Lost Futures. Ethan felt a pressure behind his eyes, a whisper in his chest. "You're already too late." The moment he touched the handle, the storm vanished. No wind, no rain, no sound. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the air was cold and stale, heavy with dust and decay. The smell of ancient paper mixed with something sharper, metallic, sour, unmistakable. Blood. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Rows upon rows of towering bookshelves stretched endlessly in all directions, forming aisles that twisted unnaturally, bending at angles that hurt to look at. Every book was bound in black leather. No titles, no authors, only dates. Dates that hadn't happened yet. Ethan stepped forward. The door slammed shut behind him. A bell rang. The sound echoed too long. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, scraping slightly against the stone floor. She emerged from between the shelves. The woman looked human only at a distance. Up close, her skin resembled old parchment. Thin, yellowed, veined with something dark beneath it. Her eyes had no color at all, just cloudy gray pools reflecting shelves that weren't behind Ethan anymore. "You're late," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I don't belong here," Ethan replied. A faint smile touched her lips. "No one ever does." She gestured for him to follow. As they walked, Ethan noticed something horrifying. Some books were open, and people stood beside them. Silent figures, men, women, children, staring down at pages that trembled in their hands. Some were crying without sound. Others smiled weakly, nodding as if accepting instructions. One man tore pages from his book, screaming, until his body collapsed inward, folding like paper. The librarian never slowed. They reached a solitary desk beneath a flickering lamp. A single book lay open. Ethan froze. The title was his name. Ethan Cole, Final Edition. His hands shook violently as he read the first page. Tomorrow, Ethan Cole will ignore the phone call at 9:43 a.m. He laughed, a sharp, desperate sound. "This is a trick. Read faster," the librarian said. The words blurred, then sharpened. At 10:12 a.m., his apartment building will collapse. At 10:14 a.m., rescue workers will pull him from the rubble, still breathing. At 10:19 a.m., they will stop. Ethan slammed the book shut. "I can change this." The librarian's smile disappeared. "No," she said quietly. "You can only read it." Ethan ran. The aisles stretched, twisted, duplicated themselves. Shelves whispered. Pages turned on their own. He glimpsed titles as he passed. Los Angeles, Final Hours. Humanity, Last Breath. Earth, Obsolete. Children screamed when they reached the final pages. Some books were still being written. Ink bled onto pages like fresh wounds. Finally, the door. He burst through. Morning came. The city looked normal. At 9:43 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. His heart pounded. Sweat soaked his palms. He didn't answer. At 10:11 a.m., the building shook. Concrete screamed. Steel snapped. Buried beneath the ruins, lungs burning, Ethan understood the final truth. The library does not predict the future. It records the moment you stop believing escape is possible. At 10:19 a.m., the world went silent. That night, a new book slid into place. Your name was already written on the cover. Somewhere deep inside the library, a bell rang. Silence is never empty. Ethan discovered this in the final seconds of his life. As his breath faded beneath the crushed concrete, the darkness didn't close in, it opened. Sound disappeared first, then pain, then time itself loosened its grip. His final thought was not fear. It was confusion. Why does it feel like I'm still falling? Ethan opened his eyes. There was no ceiling, no sky, only an endless gray void pulsing faintly, like a dying heartbeat. He tried to inhale, and succeeded. I'm alive, he whispered. No, came a familiar voice. You're archived. He turned. The librarian stood behind him, unchanged, unmoved. You died at 10:19, she continued calmly. But your story wasn't finished being read. Ethan staggered backward. This isn't heaven. Or hell. She nodded. Those places require judgment. The library requires accuracy. Around him, shapes began to emerge. Floating shelves, drifting books, entire futures suspended like corpses in water. Some were glowing. Some were rotting. The librarian led him through a corridor that did not exist before. The shelves here were different. The books were breathing. Their covers rose and fell slowly, as if lungs were trapped inside. This section, she said, is for readers who finish their own ending. Ethan swallowed. Why bring me back? She stopped walking. For the same reason we bring all of you back, she said. To understand. She pulled a book from the shelf. It screamed, not metaphorically. The sound tore through the void, a raw, human shriek that ended abruptly when she slammed the book shut. That, she said, was a man who tried to warn the world. Ethan stared at the shelves. Are these possible futures? The librarian tilted her head. No, possible futures imply choice. She placed a hand on one shelf. These are inevitable outcomes. She opened another book. Inside were photographs. Real photographs. Cities before collapse. Families days before disappearance. Children smiling minutes before extinction. Every book here was written the moment belief failed, she continued. The moment someone chose comfort over fear. Denial over action. Ethan's voice trembled. Then why let us read them at all? She looked at him. So you can never say you weren't warned. They entered a massive chamber. Thousands of people stood frozen, each holding a book open in their hands. Their eyes were gone, not damaged, erased. They finished reading, the librarian said softly, and stayed. One woman suddenly turned her head, skin cracking, mouth opening far too wide. You can't change it, she whispered. You can't change it. You can't change it. Her jaw snapped shut. She became still again. Ethan backed away. Let me go. The librarian shook her head. You already left once. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. On it lay a book bound in something that looked disturbingly like skin. The title was unfinished. Ethan Cole. Ink crawled across the page as he watched. Ethan Cole will understand the library was never built to predict disasters. It was built to preserve them. What happens when it finishes? Ethan asked. The librarian stepped aside. You become part of the collection. The ground trembled. Shelves groaned. Far above, something massive shifted, something alive. Ethan realized then. The library wasn't a building. It was a thing. An ancient intelligence feeding on futures, on certainty, on endings that could no longer be avoided. Why us? He screamed. The librarian's eyes darkened. Because humanity is the most predictable species we've ever archived. The book snapped shut. The title burned into the cover. Final edition. Ethan felt himself thinning, memories peeling away, voice dissolving, name losing meaning. As he was placed onto a shelf, he heard the bell ring again. Somewhere. In another city. At another time. A storm began. Every monster has an origin. Not a birth, but a necessity. Before the Library of Lost Futures existed, time was unstable. Futures branched endlessly. Outcomes shifted. Civilizations escaped extinction by accident, intuition, luck. That uncertainty was inefficient. So something ancient learned to record, not to prevent, not to guide, only to preserve certainty. The librarian stopped before a door Ethan hadn't noticed before. It wasn't iron. It was bone. This section, she said, is where the first future was lost. Inside, the shelves were crude, uneven, hand-carved. The books were thin, primitive. This was when humanity first learned to fear tomorrow, the librarian said. She opened the oldest book. Inside were symbols scratched into stone paper. The fire will not stop. The sky will turn black. The tribe will not survive the winter. Ethan felt something tighten inside him. They knew, he whispered. Yes, she replied. And knowing broke them. The first future recorded wasn't a disaster. It was acceptance. The moment they stopped trying, Ethan turned to her. You were there. The librarian did not deny it. I have worn many forms, she said. Scribe, oracle, historian, executioner. What are you really? She stepped closer. I am what remains when hope becomes unnecessary. Her reflection did not appear on the glass of nearby bookcases. Only shelves. Endless shelves. They moved deeper. Here, the shelves were overcrowded. Books pressed tightly together, some bleeding ink, others shaking violently. Why so many now? Ethan asked. The librarian traced her fingers across spines dated only days ahead. Because your species learned how to distract itself. Screens. Noise. Comfort. You stopped fearing the future, she said. So the future stopped resisting. A book burst open nearby. Inside, a coastal city drowning in silence as the ocean rose calmly, politely. No screams. No panic. Just inevitability. They entered a wing with a single word carved into the archway. Denial. Here, the books were pristine. Untouched. Unread. These futures could still collapse differently, Ethan said. The librarian shook her head. No. These are futures people refuse to look at. She pulled one free. Pandemic escalation ignored. Warnings labeled exaggeration. Final casualty count revised upward until numbers lost meaning. Ethan felt sick. These people had time. Yes, she said. Time is the most wasted resource. Ethan noticed something wrong. Some shelves had hands. Fingers curled around the edges of books. These were readers who tried to stay, the librarian said. They thought observing endings would protect them. Faces were pressed into wood grain. Mouths open in silent understanding. They are very good at holding things, she added. They stopped before a massive volume chained to the floor. The cover pulsed faintly. What's that? Ethan asked. The librarian hesitated. That, she said, is your era. The book opened itself. Inside were pages that changed as he watched. Headlines rewriting. Dates shifting by hours. Faces blurring. This future isn't fixed yet, Ethan said. For the first time in centuries, she admitted. Hope flickered in him. So it can be changed? The librarian's voice lowered. No, it can only be delayed. Ethan turned away, fists clenched. All of this, he said, because people stopped believing they could escape? The librarian nodded. Humans don't fear endings, she said. They fear effort without guarantee. She closed the book. The library thrives on that fear. As Ethan walked, he noticed reflections in the glass. Not his own. Different faces. Different ages. All staring back. You're not alone, the librarian said softly. You never read this story by accident. The reflections leaned closer. Listening. Waiting suddenly. The bell rang. Not far away. Not distant. Close. The librarian stiffened. That shouldn't happen yet, she whispered. A new door appeared. Fresh stone. Clean carving. A name was forming on it. Not Ethan's. Not yet. She turned to him. Someone else is arriving. The door finished forming. Stone settled. Dust fell. A name appeared. Slowly, deliberately. Each letter carving itself deeper than the last. Ethan couldn't read it. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because his mind rejected it. This has never happened before, Ethan whispered. The librarian didn't respond. For the first time since he met her, she looked uneasy. The door opened, and someone stepped inside. The person looked ordinary. No fear. No confusion. No panic. Just awareness. They looked around the library, not with terror, but recognition. I was wondering when you'd show yourselves, the stranger said. The bell rang once, then stopped out. A book slid across the floor toward the newcomer. Black leather. Fresh binding. Unopened. The librarian spoke, her voice sharper now. Read. The stranger looked at the book, then pushed it away. No. The word echoed unnaturally, bending shelves, cracking glass. Every book in the library shuddered. That is not how this works, the librarian said. The stranger smiled faintly. That's the problem, they replied. The air thickened. The shelves leaned inward. Ethan felt pressure crush his thoughts. What happens, the stranger asked calmly, when a future isn't accepted? The librarian said nothing. The stranger continued, walking past shelves where people were fused into wood. You don't feed on death, they said. You feed on surrender. They turned to Ethan. The moment he ignored the phone call, the book was already finished. Ethan's chest tightened. That choice, the stranger said, was the meal. Cracks appeared in the floor. Ink leaked from thousands of books at once, pooling like blood. Dates began to blur. It did not burn. It did not scream. It waited. On its cover. This story is still being read. You finish reading. Nothing happens. No storm. No bell. No librarian. Just silence. Until you realize something small. Something wrong. The future feels heavier now. Like it noticed you noticing it. And somewhere. Not in a library. Not on a shelf. A blank page waits. For the moment you decide nothing can be changed. And when that moment comes, it will write itself. If you enjoyed this horror story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon for more terrifying stories.